Well, the unedited version begins. So here we are. You can open it up and run down here.
Okay, a couple months ago we sat together and we discussed this. I think it was called coronavirus at that time.
I think it
I
was.
think it's now COVID, or we don't even want to really name it. It's just sort of that thing that has sort of, I don't know what you might say, negative ruled our lives, influenced us anyway in the last few months. So we thought we'd just take a little bit of time to discuss it here. We're just free flowing here.
Yeah.
We don't have quotes from Dr. Fauci and whatever. We're just going to talk about our thoughts and our feelings as it relates to us personally, as well as to the congregation as a whole. So, in the beginning, what were your thoughts?
In the beginning,
Back.
I was thinking it's hard to remember. It was 3 months, but just as vague as it is, and as far as real details. But the news came out about this. It started to build. Things started to change rapidly, as you know so well, especially during that time of the sadness of the tragedy in your family of losing those two beautiful souls that are no longer with us. And I was kind of connected in that sense. So it's in that era. I mean, it sounds terrible, era, but way back in a sense. And there was trying to come to grips with this virus and what it could amount to, what it could do, and all those things, including graphs and charts and the flattening of the curve and stuff like that. And I was caught up in it.
Sure.
Maybe a little bit careless in the beginning, myself personally, and I remember my children getting in touch with me and saying, "Dad, your age put you in a category, your immune suppressant put you in a category," and I even had a daughter-in-law text or call and say, "Stay home, we'll bring your groceries to you." This is like the first 2 weeks, I guess you could say. And so, it was just facing that. None of the other things seemed to really be a part of it. I mean, that's what I remember.
And for us, it was a different thing. You mentioned, the death of Rosa and Juniper, and that's when it all hit.
Yeah.
We were not in that same situation as you. We were surrounded by a multitude of people.
Yeah.
So right from the beginning, I think we sort of just had to say, well, we can't really quarantine ourselves. We can't really go and cloister somewhere because we had visitors from out of state and Rosa's family here. We had people bringing meals on a daily basis, people coming and going, some who were following the distancing and some who just would come right in and just give us a big hug. Sure. And we were, what do we do with this? And initially I balked at it majorly, and I think there's some history to that. But then I stepped back and I thought, wait, what is really behind the governor's, what do we call it? Rules, laws, mandates, regulations, whatever we would call them. Sure. And again, began to think that, is he really doing this to punish us as Christians, as believers, or is it for the benefit of our physical well-being? And I took the high road and I tried to maintain that throughout. I'm not saying I did a real good job of it all the time, but just to say, if it's for the benefit of our brother. I read an article way in the beginning, the title of it was "Love Thy Neighbor as Thyself," and that's the approach that particular author wrote on this, rather than looking at it as the big strong arm of the government, but rather for our own protection, for something that was very real.
Yeah.
It still is.
It still is.
130,000 or whatever. Yeah. Isn't that what it is? I don't know what the deaths are in the U.S. Yeah. But obviously it's had some effect. And we're not going to get into the political bantering on numbering. I mean, you name it.
No. But it had a huge effect in the beginning.
Yes.
When we started to grapple with it. As individuals, as persons in our personal life. And, I remember especially going, and being with you and your family, and the hugs were there, and of course, how could you not? I mean, I hugged you, and I don't do that. We're not
right.
hugging.
We don't hug each other.
My heart was breaking for my brother. Sure. I was, the virus was the farthest thing from my mind, and but then you start to have to deal with it, and dealing with it on a personal level, as opposed to, I think that this is visits with Pastor Phil and Pastor Ron.
Sure. So what does the Bible say about COVID-19?
Yeah, because we don't operate in a vacuum as a church or as pastors with political views and that sort of thing. I mean, those are there because we're part of both kingdoms. But we were really, I guess we both felt the weight of, okay, we have some scriptures that we should consider, at least consider, you know. Wouldn't that be right?
Sure.
You know, so there's a few of them. You listed a few, and I had them printed out just so we can kind of keep on track. And what does the Bible say? And everyone knows these verses.
Sure. This is, and I, you know, we spoke about that earlier. You know, we even had a sermon text that you know, addressed that issue. Paul writing to the Romans in the 13th chapter, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God.
Yeah.
And Peter then, his fellow laborer in the first epistle of Peter, should have had this maybe there in front of us. Second chapter, 13th verse, this was the sermon text that I spoke on one Sunday. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God. So that's sort of foundational as far as what should we do with a law that comes down from the governor.
Right. And we couldn't just quickly just dismiss them. And there's lots of course, debate. And we're not here to debate these things. But just realize, you know, I think every Christian, but in particular those who are called to lead, oversee, you know, help the congregation through it from a perspective of a congregation of believers.
So was the governor telling us or forbidding us from worship?
Absolutely not.
That's a question.
Yeah, you have to define what is worship in some people's mind. It is the physical gathering.
And that is.
It's understandable. I mean, that's all we've known since I was a little baby.
Or maybe I should say then more explicitly or specifically, did he forbid us from preaching the word? Because there are some, you know, even among us, I understand that they say that this directive from the government was a direct assault on the church, telling you that you cannot preach.
Right,
You know?
which is just not true. It just isn't true. Were there restrictions on how that is delivered? Yes. I mean, we all know that. There's just no question. And is that difficult? Absolutely.
Very.
We have struggled with it. It has been really disturbing to me. Our lives, of course, affected hugely in a lot of ways. The lives of our parishioners. Can we say a little more? Can we give them that credit?
I think so. Yeah.
Because here we are at the church even today, although the restrictions are less, but we did through this time come. I remember, you know, somebody left a cleaning kit in front of the office and I was wiping things down and I was washing my hands a lot. You know, there was still that reality of, well, you know, this virus could be coming.
And it was very quiet here.
Oh, was it quiet?
No phone calls, no emails, no visits, nothing. It's like everybody was in a cave for those first couple of weeks or whatever.
You know, and again, your situation, you know, warranted a different interaction with family, let's say. Right. Even my own family, it was, well, you know, we kind of withheld from going to our children's homes and having them over for a while. So it was different. But then began the questions. Then it started to grow, and then it you know, as far as the church itself, then we start to have to be challenged by these scriptures, not challenged by them, but challenged by trying to apply them in our interaction in this amazing country, based on amazing principles, God-given principles that very few, if any, other society has ever known. And you know, it's a gift. What we have is a gift from God. I truly believe it.
Even the preamble, I think it is the preamble, the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
You know, that's guaranteed in our Constitution, the pursuit of happiness. You know, and happiness for a Christian probably is getting together in fellowship, true fellowship.
Hugely.
It is.
It just stirs our hearts. We could say, well, we've taken it for granted. We could go down that road. I don't want to do that necessarily, but it is something that we got very used to. So when it's taken away, wow, you really, really then see it.
But as far as the biblical examples that we have of directives that are against the church, we would go to Acts chapter 4 and 5. Acts chapter 4, verses 17 through 19. You see, these have been used as an example probably at times when we say, well, we ought to obey God rather than man.
Right.
And that is true. But let's look at it in the context here. First of all, Acts chapter 4, verse 17. But that it spread no further among the people, let us straitly threaten them that they speak henceforth to no man in this name. And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered and said unto them, whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you more than unto God, judge ye. Very specific. You cannot talk any longer about this man.
Yeah, don't spread this.
Don't spread this
in
word.
any way, shape, or form, really.
No.
And they didn't have churches at the time. They were just
No, they were-
in the public square, including the temple, preaching Christ.
So in a way, to put the best construction on the leaders of the land, as they gave us the opportunity, even spelled it out, that you can have support staff there and you can preach online sermons, you can have this many people there as necessary to preach the word. They almost gave us I sort of look at that over against the restaurants and the bars that were also closed, and they didn't say, well, these bars, we're going to give them a specific manner in which they can serve you drinks.
Right.
Yeah.
Later on, it's
Later on,
getting there,
but it has opened up, sure, but at the time.
So is it for us as well. Yeah.
Sure. And the other example in chapter 5 of Acts is very similar, verses 28 and 29. Did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in his name? And behold, ye have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man.
So we do have that clear. To me, it's clear. And I don't believe that these things are in conflict with the struggles we have with our government and our system of government. The problem is that I think we're just really maybe the frustrations of our expectations under the rule of law that was written up has brought it in and drawn it into this argument. So this is where we began as pastors, as a church, as board members, and we have struggled with it. We haven't just blown this off. The discussions have been very animated at times, and that's okay. That's okay.
From all involved.
Yes, from everybody involved.
And I was just looking at my desk calendar the other day and I wrote board meetings, emergency board meeting to discuss this. Emergency board meetings, even Friday nights at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Walt calling a meeting for us to come in the evening, and Saturday mornings and so on. So, wow. I'm not saying that, tough us, dealing with this as well as a board, but it hasn't been an easy thing.
No,
it's a personal struggle too, isn't it?
It's personal.
It's pastoral as well as personal.
We
We are still people.
We are. I have a terrible thing to say. It's a confession, in a sense. Driving here just now, battleground. Coming back after lunch, bringing the camera. I see some people with some signs over by Alan Ernie's. From a distance, I can see, there's a couple of well-known signs that people might be using in this time, not necessarily COVID, but the other unrest, without getting into a lot of it. One of the signs, and these were very young people, I'd say early 20s at the most, and they're walking, there's about 5 of them, and the last sign said, abolish the police. And my pastor mode was kind of pushed to the other side of the pickup.
Oh, definitely.
And I rolled down the window, and I said, in a real question, abolish the police? And the young lady just kind of looked at me, and I said, do you have a brain? And I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but it just spilled out of me. It just spilled out of me.
Yes.
And now, as a pastor, would I have addressed, should I have addressed it? Hopefully she doesn't remember my face and come to the church someday, but, I'm personal too.
Sure.
I have a voice and frustration.
And we struggle with this on the personal level. I'm great at it, when we can't go and do this and that and so on and so forth. And then comes the responsibility of the congregation. And I understand that the numbers and all that kind of stuff and the graphs that you could throw in front of me all day long would prove or disprove something. But the reality is we have a responsibility here. And how do we deal with it?
It's hard. It's hard from a, because a Christian, we're always a Christian, no matter what part of this world we're in, but we're also very personal and reasonable too. Like for me, for instance, just the fact, abolish the police is absolutely unreasonable. So I responded, that's unreasonable. if you had a little explanation about what you meant by that, maybe we could have a dialogue.
Sure,
You know, reform or whatever.
Right,
But
right.
we're losing that. We're
have.
kind of losing
We
that.
have.
It's just react.
Mm-hmm.
And not good.
Yeah. I saw a little, well, we said this is going to be unedited and raw, so here I'm going to go off
Well,
on,
maybe I'll edit out
on
mine.
Facebook stuff, you know. And I saw a little meme today, you know, that in the beginning of this shutdown, there's a picture of a guy and he's so smiling and he said he's learning to make new banana bread recipes from the internet. That's right in the beginning of this quarantine, shutdown, whatever. Now, there's a picture of another guy hauling a rifle and he's saying, abolish the police.
Yeah.
Now, two separate issues here really, but I think this stress that has been put on the people has had an effect on the latter, this race relation thing that we're dealing with now. I don't think you can really disconnect the two.
No,
so it's very real for us individually as collectively.
Yeah. And that's where we are today.
That's where we are today.
This little in the midst of all this.
What do we do?
Now, how do we act? What do we do? How do we respond to these things that are coming? You know?
The Bible study that Pastor Ron has been doing, this is maybe the fifth one now or so this evening. You've been doing 4 or 5 online. Every Wednesday he put one online. And tonight we're going to be actually at the church.
Yeah.
And I think there's something that really, you know, some of the things that, the experiences that the disciples had at that time, and when Jesus would come to them behind closed doors for fear of the Jews, and what would he say? Peace be with you. He didn't say, as we were talking this morning just a little bit about this, he didn't say, I'm going to take you away and bring you way down into Africa or up into Northern Europe where you're so far removed from this, and then you'll just be able to flourish as a Christian. No, he told them just the opposite. Remain here in Jerusalem until you be endued with power from on high. The center of the unrest. So where do we rest? Where do we find rest right now?
How could he preface it all by saying, peace be unto you? And then, like we were talking earlier, and he also says, I send you out as sheep among the wolves. Well, can't you find a little better, more peaceful, more organized, more reasonable atmosphere for me to operate in as a Christian?
And here we find ourselves in the midst of turmoil now, and some of us, all of us to some extent and at some time, are surprised and wondering why. Why is this happening to us?
And of course, you know, I don't want to beat people up by saying, have you looked at history? But I think it helps us at times to remember that we're not the first generation to be challenged. And by way of comparison, from my perspective, we are very low on the spectrum at this time. I don't know what the future holds. And I know there's fear that it's moving toward that. But this is still, it's a hostile world, but it's still a world that our Lord, again, as last Sunday's message, has authority over. And where does the peace then come from? Because it's, you know, one thing to be in the midst of the turmoil, but it's another thing at the same time to have a peace that actually passes the understanding of what we might think peace looks like, which would be no more unrest in the city, no more virus. My vacation is still on track. My children are acting nice, and you know that we think that's peace. This is a different peace.
It is. Not that the world giveth, give I you.
And
as where is it in? It's in Philippians, isn't it? Be anxious for nothing.
Words of
that's it. Really is, and it's not. These aren't empty platitudes. These are. You might say commands when we are commanded to pray. I understand that, but there's promises attached to them. And the peace of God will keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. That's the promise to this anxiety that we were all feeling.
It is. When my heart is overwhelmed, then I look to the rock, and that's where this is all coming from. He knows what kind of a world he came into, and it isn't just those people. He also came into a very troubled heart, a very dark heart, and gave light and peace to it on a personal level. So here, I think we need to be looking for that. I mean, praying for it. And when we're troubled, remember some things. You know.
And that's really all we have to tell you as far as the future. I personally, and I know Pastor Ron has voiced it too, that he's positive things are going to open up. I'm even positive we could go way off and start talking about other aspects of our life. But as far as the church, we're opening up, and I realize it's not what we expect or what we want, what we desire.
No.
50 people at a time in the
Yeah.
sanctuary and 50 in the basement. No, that's not what we would desire. But there have been some who have been blessed by it and encouraged by it, and our encouragement would be in the same vein.
It
you know?
is, yeah. I so appreciated just seeing some familiar faces of the parishioners of our church Sunday. The few that were here that I just wanted to go and just say hi to them. It was really special, and I think those things are valuable. I think, while all the noise and the turmoil and our opinions and our political stances and all that confusion is there, take a little time to find the good things, to look for the good things. And I am optimistic. My wife was kind of surprised because maybe by nature I'm not an optimist at times, and I'm not patient. I understand that. But for some reason here I am. I see things going good.
Could it be, we have the opportunity here. We're not going out we don't have to work and deal, even with the things that our brothers in the construction trade have dealt with in the last couple of months. We don't have to deal with that. We can come here and we can listen to, well, first of all, read the Bible, read commentaries, listen to podcasts on theological, we're in a sort of an insulated world right here. So I understand that too. That's where the struggle comes from, the personal things that we are dealing with versus maybe what other people are dealing with. And we would show compassion to those also.
Yeah, I mean, we could liken it in an extreme sense. Somebody that lives up, on a mountainside, and it's, nice and cozy, and he's fishing every day. And then the nurse in the intensive care unit working with a COVID patient. Their perspective is going to be different. And so I appreciate that. I need to have compassion on those who it directly affects a lot more on a personal level than me. But I still want to encourage you.
Oh, definitely.
I do.
Yeah.
And I guess that's our calling is to preach the wonder of God's grace.
Point to the promises found in the Word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, looking forward, this is probably getting long enough, this short visit here, but looking forward, I am looking forward. I really, really am. We have some challenges ahead as far as these things are implemented, Lord willing. Even the subject of communion has come up. We're praying now that we can
You're dealing with that
be once again partaking of the Lord's Supper.
Hopefully by next month.
Yeah.
That's in my mind.
That we can do that for the strengthening of our faith. And then our hopes can overwhelm the overwhelming feelings from the outside that affect us. So, what do you think?
I think that's about it.
That's a visit. So hopefully I won't have to edit this. So anyway, I'll just go turn the camera off. God bless you all.
Yes, God's peace to all.
Hopefully see a few of you tonight at Bible study.